This episode is proudly sponsored by Resilience Through Fitness. RTF's whole body health approach focuses on helping first responders get adequate rest, fuel, and physical preparedness for their challenging shifts serving the communities they love. The RTF coaching staff are all current first responders that have a passion for fitness. With one-on-one online coaching tailored specifically to your gym, home, and traveling needs, the staff strives to ensure that you come home safe at the end of the shift. RTF also donates a portion of select sales back to supporting veteran and first responder charities. Use the discount code GRITTY15 for 15% off your personalized coaching or next order online. That's GRITTY15 at resilience-through-fitness.com. All one word, resilience-through-fitness.com. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric. And today I'm excited to introduce a panel, and we're going to be talking about what law enforcement needs, and that's just mindset. It's balancing real talk with constructive. I'm trying to use the word constructive today rather than positive, because sometimes when we get in this vein of like positive, it sounds like fluffy, but no, it's like real talk. Like, how do we get more constructive about where we need to go as individuals, where we need to go as like law enforcement culture? And so I'm super excited to introduce who's on the panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves further. But we have JT from Survive Policing. We have Mac, return guest from the Zen, aka the Zen Cop. Thanks for coming back, man. And then returning guest, Trevor Wolcott, my old battle buddy from the Battle Buddy episode, very early on in the show. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining this, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So going in that order, JT, can you please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your story for those that are unfamiliar, and when they're not driving, if they're listening to this in the car, they can pull up your page and start following and see the fantastic content that you put out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm JT. Spent 14 years in law enforcement, got out back in 2021, started Survive Policing back at the same time at Survive Policing. I also help with at Police Post as well. And originally just kind of found myself at the end of my career facing a lot of different challenges, personally and professionally. Got an opportunity in the private sector, been in the private sector ever since, but wanted to certainly give back to the community. I love law enforcement. I love my time in it. For the most part, obviously there's challenges in everyone's career, but wanted to give back. And especially when I kind of saw some things that happened, not only in my career, but again, just in the profession itself over the last 5 to 10 years, that just, man, it can be a wild ride. So I wanted to somehow give back to the community. I wasn't sure really how to do that. Got on Instagram, kind of just started making content. Soon enough, after a year or so of kind of doing that every day, started getting a lot of good feedback, and really just started putting more, as you put it, kind of like real talk out there, which just started resonating with people. And that's when I really kind of realized like something was clicking. So people were seeing what I was writing and really just either saying, hey, like, thank you for saying that, or, I wish I could say the same thing, right? Because we're seeing the same things, we're feeling the same things. So thank you. And then just kept going from there. Just continuing to try to find ways to give back to the community, to share my knowledge, help others along the way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And was it? I think I just saw this, but like Rogan gave a little shout out to police posts. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Or is that correct?
Yeah. He's definitely shouted out a couple times. It's which is super cool. He's obviously a guy that's I think is fully supportive of law enforcement, but also, and I think we would probably, I know Mac would probably agree with this, that we're also probably the most critical of the profession as anyone, right? Like, we want it to be good. We want good people in it. And I think that's how it has to be. If we don't have a standard, what are we doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, fantastic, and I'm sure we'll get there in different veins. Mac, you're up.
Mac Rollins. I've been a cop since 2010. Worked patrol, did a couple other assignments. I've been a detective for 5 years. I'm currently working sex assault, child abuse, and trafficking. I work for a sheriff's office in Northern California. My whole thing and kind of what started, I guess, my movement was a really strange introduction to my own horrible experience in 2020, which led to a lot of mental health evaluation and a bunch of other stuff that I had to kind of start reconsidering moving forward with work. So if you guys want to know more about that, it's on my page. It's on the blog, and the blog is kind of what started. I started writing a lot, and the blog eventually turned into a podcast, and it just sort of took off from there. There's been a lot of the really horrible things I've experienced through this job, but also a lot of really good ones. And I feel like if more people were aware of, I guess, kind of the waves that you can hit and the challenges you can hit, it makes it easier to comprehend those things and move forward. So, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a degree in psychology. I'm working on that, not the doctor part, but the psychology stuff. And my long-term goal is to leave law enforcement someday and do clinical therapy for first responders specific to cop stuff, but that's still a ways down the road. But yeah, I've got to meet some really cool people. I've got to have some really neat experiences. And through all of this, I've just sort of grown a lot. And I hope that my growth and my advice, which still shocks me to this day that people actually listen to me. And, I get a lot of cool responses, text messages or DMs, all this stuff that just kind of shows that, every little bit counts. So I guess in a sentence, the four of us even here today, I think we can all relate that there's much work to be done and not enough time in the day. And if we can help one person, then it's worth it. So that's kind of my spiel. And I'm married with 2 boys. Yeah, that's kind of my life and my story in a nutshell. If you want to find more or find out more, read about more, the Zen Cop is my Instagram. That's kind of my only media outlet other than YouTube. So it's all me. I don't really have a team or anything like that. It's just when I have time. And so thanks for having me, and looking forward to some good conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. And yeah, please do check out the Zen Cop. And you're a great writer. I feel
Thank you.
that vibe, and also your art, on your social media. It's
Thanks.
very cool. All right, Trevor.
Yeah, my name's Trevor Wolcott. I was a cop for 10 years with Eric. I've had the privilege of joining him on this podcast as well. I am not celebrities like yourselves. I don't have a podcast or anything like that. But I do have a passion for the profession and the people that are in it. Like I said, I did 10 years law enforcement, then went over to the fire EMT side to see what that side was like. And there's pros and cons to everything. But ultimately left that and currently work in the private sector. And if I kind of think of my goal of this thing, a lot of times in law enforcement, people think there's nothing else they can do or they might be stuck. And there's a lot of other avenues they can pursue. And so that's kind of a big passion of mine, is just encouraging people to reach out to those goals, even if they are scary, and kind of breaking out of the mindset that I'm just a cop, I don't have any other skills, because it's incredible the skills we have afterwards. So that's really kind of me in a nutshell. Nowhere to search for me on the internet, anything like that. But I'm super excited to be here with you guys and be a part of this.
No, yeah, thank you, man. Always great conversations, and I mean, Trevor and I could fill days of time that we've talked about specifically, like what does the culture need, and that's when we were in the ranks together, and since he's left, like what do we need? Like how do we flip this? How do we lead a young generation, an eager generation in a more positive direction, because, he's one of my best friends, and a lot of his best friends are still in this job. And I think ultimately that's the thing, is like, despite how much time you have, and I said it a lot in recruiting, I was like, hey, whether you give us 2 years or 20 years, but if you do it with passion and the upright values, like, thank you for your time. Like, we self-judge, we judge each other, but in the culture, it's so like, oh, he left, she left in 20. I mean, we're hearing this year, like 2020, 2021. We had a lot of attrition, but at the same time, we don't judge the military folks that put in 4 or 5 years, like, just because they weren't lifers. And it's not for everyone. And so I love a lot of where this conversation's already perceivably going to intersect, because I think that is a thing, when we talk about real talk, like what do cops need to do? I think, man, I'm just going to drop this bomb early on, but like, let's talk about identity and like in humility, maybe those themes, because like we got two guys here on the thing that are examples of like, hey, how you can give, give a damn about your profession and the community, and also say like, hey, it's not for me now anymore, right? And you're doing other positive things. And so I kind of want to open that up because I think it does bleed into cynicism and a lot of the things I was looking to talk about in the profession when people have that. Sometimes I think the overinvestment is a key role in that.
Yeah, I think like the first thing that popped out to me, I think Mac and I had probably talked about this before too, was just like making that your identity, right? I think all of us, anyone that goes into law enforcement has a drive to help people, right? To serve the community, your state, your city, your country, whatever it is. And I think a lot of us probably take that very, very seriously, very personally. One of my main concerns with us as a profession, and I think we do kind of facilitate that type of thinking, especially with our younger officers when we recruit them with those things in mind, right? You're doing something that a lot of people won't. You're here to serve your community. It's this is your calling, right? What happens when it's all gone? Whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, right? It strips away part of your identity if that's what you've made it. In a lot of cases, those that find their way out don't have a choice. People find their way out in a lot of different reasons. And you'll have officers that retire after 30, 40 years that feel the same way, right? They leave it behind and they struggle because that's their life. That's their identity. That's who they are. They're a police officer. And I think starting from the beginning is important, where we just have to reframe that conversation that we have with young people coming into the job. That it's a profession. It's an important profession. We obviously all care about it. We love it. But it's not everything that you are. I tell a lot of people that, this idea that it's your calling because you're called to serve people. There's a lot of people out there that serve others, right? Firefighters, pastors, teachers, nurses, like those people are serving, right? So it's kind of insulting to all those other people that are out there serving their community that we pretend like we're the only ones doing it, right? So, and I think that goes back to that humility, right? Like, let's have some humility from the beginning to say, hey, like, look, this is a profession just like any other. It's important, and we're going to treat it with importance, and we're going to treat it with the reverence it deserves, and we're going to treat it as professionals. But with that, we also understand that the end of it could come at any day for any of us, and we have to respect that. It's one of the I've posted before, and I've seen other people post too. And Mac, I think, has posted something great about this as well. Is like the day you leave the job, they're ready to replace you, right? And that's tough, but that is the reality. And if we start the conversation from there, when we're recruiting people, when we're trying to find these people, when we're trying to mold them into what we're looking for in law enforcement, I think we're going to do ourselves a disservice by not doing that. We kind of push people into this idea that this is all they are. And then when you get on the other end of it, right, and you get out and you're like lost, you don't know what to do. You don't know where to go. And you leave something behind in the job. So I think just starting from there, just making sure that like we're having these honest conversations, especially with these young cops as they're coming in, and just saying, hey, like, look, like we understand that you believe that this is your calling, but it could last 5 years. It could last 35 years. We just don't know. None of us will. And we got to be honest about it. And we got to be honest with ourselves about that too.
Yeah. No, you hit on so many things. And I think that humility piece of, hey, they're going to replace you. And at many points in my career, I felt like that was so cold, and maybe someone will hear this wrong because I'm technically management now as commander, but like, no, it's true, because the agency doesn't care. No agency cares, because the agency is not a person. It doesn't have emotions. It's a machine. It has to do what it does with resources, whether that's a car or whether that's a person. Now, we in the agency should give a damn, and we should treat each other like our brothers and sisters when we're doing everything we can to support you, right? However, it is still a job, and that's where it gets really muddy, right? It's a calling, it's more than a job, it's a lifestyle, it's a culture. But at the end of the day, like, it is a job as well, right? And so I don't like to put things in one box. I think the overlap is what makes it hard, and our emotional connection to these things and these memories and these experiences, and being out there, putting it out there for each other and for innocents out there, it becomes so heavy. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right? Like, we don't have a say at times. We might have a say, but after 35 years, it might just be time, or something happens to me off duty and I just can't do the job anymore. Like, I might not have that choice. I like to think that if we build the right foundation, as you said, JT, right, with like, how do we guide our new folks or current folks with wellness and with the right mindset, then hopefully it's not like an obituary where, oh, he worked here for 8 years and now he's gone. Well, hopefully, like, all those experiences and bonds, you can parlay that into a continued life of service, however that looks, right? Because I'm absolutely with you, right? This is a very important job. It's a necessary job, but there are so many other important jobs and necessary jobs or volunteer work that is critical to the fabric of our society.
Yeah, I agree, and it's such a weird. I think one of the biggest things, though, that I always try to see, okay, what makes it so different? I would say the mortality aspect plays a major role. There's not very many jobs, if any, next to maybe the military, where the loss of human life is on the table, and a variety of platforms, not just ours, but it's a two-way street. So you have all of these things that play into, I guess, what would be a very different mindset that we're sort of forced to adopt over time. And man, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down. It's not even funny, but it is interesting geographically how different we are. And I have the same conversations with friends that I haven't seen that work for different agencies. Everybody has the same problem or problems. It's not just limited to one zip code, which is interesting. But then it just begs the question, well, how low do we set the bar? How much leniency do we give before we really start seeing just not bad cops, but cops who probably shouldn't be cops? And the interesting thing for me is I always go to history. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not the last time. It'll happen again and again. But tech-wise, this is the first kind of weird generation we have where there are so many things lacking in the human element arena, I guess, where some of these newer, I hate calling them kids, but the new generation, right? Let's just say your 21 to 31 year olds, where it's going to be a very different perspective from, I think we're all really similar in age. So it's going to be different for the four of us to even have a conversation with this person, let alone explain the social dynamics of law enforcement and the amount of just liability you open yourself up to when you put on that badge and get into a car. And someone mentioned the Rogan stuff, and that's been floating around again recently with the Trump interview he did recently. But it's just one of those things where if we don't continue to make an effort like we're doing now, which is fine, podcasts are helpful, but at the end of the day, management, we talked about that, I think, previously and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, just kind of diving into it, there's a lot of things that we can do to help. And it's weird having 2 out of the 4 of us not active anymore. And an analogy I'll give really quickly is the car, or just the mileage on the car. And you could have a Toyota Tundra that's got 180,000 miles on it, and it was just Highway 5 all day long. And then you have another Tundra that has 20,000 miles, and it was just off-road crazy stuff. And so the perspective that we're expected to sort of abide by is this idea that we're going to have this as a career forever. And these days, I don't think that's a healthy option. And then do you continue? I'm part of a really weird bracket where I'm 2.75 at 57. It may as well be 80. Like, you're going to have 57-year-old cops pushing a patrol car? Fuck no. It's going to be so weird to see our group get old. So again, lots of different things we could talk about and rabbit holes, but yeah, I'm excited for the future because I think it's hopeful, because I think that's just what we have to do. But I'm also terrified for what policing will look like in the next 2, 3, 4 decades.
Yeah. I just want to touch on something you said, Mac, was about the mortality, right? And like, again, this profession is unique, and it's it's one of the I think more honorable professions that anyone can get into, and it's almost as if sometimes as a community, we earn this badge of honor, right, through the work we've done, the things that we've seen, and then when we leave the community wants to revoke your badge of honor from you, right, and kick you out of the group. And and I think that's where we see a lot of officers that get out and they struggle, right? I think we all look for that validation, and when we don't, if we don't have that internal validation for what we've done in the job, that's when we're like, hey, like we're looking for it from someone else, and you're not getting it, right? Because they say, hey, like, you did 5 years or 8 years or whatever it was, like that wasn't enough, which is it's kind of a funny thing to talk about, right? Like where is that line drawn? But I do think there's something there, right?
JT, you bring up really good
Go
points,
ahead.
and Mac also about something that I was hoping to touch on is he kind of used a very strong word of like that we're forced to adapt to, like the mortality in this job, like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious your guys' take on. I don't think you can do this job without identifying personally, like you identify yourself in this role, whether that is beforehand or you get into it and it's forced to, because it is that much more than a job. And I think you have to, in a way, as a human being, have to identify with the role, even if you're forced to, like Max said, through the things we see. And what's interesting is once you leave that, I've been gone for years now, and I've had other careers and they've been successful. There's still a part of me that identifies as a police officer, and I think it always will. And there's still a part of me that still struggles, like, should I go back? Like, who am I? Where do I get my validation? Even as simple as like, I'd love to put on the uniform again and feel that feeling. Like all these very childish things. And I would be interested on any one of your guys' inputs on, is there a way to even do this job without identifying that or taking it that personally? Because I think we almost need to. And is it something that will always exist with anyone that does this job in a small amount in the back of their head? I mean, it's just kind of tossing it up to see your guys' thought on it.
I think it's hard not to be jaded. It's weird. It's like this. I really, it makes me cringe when I think about it, but we all sort of have this very sort of, I don't know, we need to be validated for the things that we did because nobody really understands just how horrible they were. And I don't think it's an odd expectation, but it's there.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much stuff that we've done, seen, experienced over the years that if you put a USB drive into my head and just hit play and hit fast forward, it would look like something out of a fucking horror movie. It just would be some of the most horrible, horrible, horrible things possible. So there's this weird part of me that just says, no, I need to be, you have to understand this isn't just what it looks like on TV. This isn't just something as simple as, I go to work and I come home. No, it's usually hell. And I've never, ever been one to feel comfortable with people saying, thank you for your service. It actually makes me really uncomfortable. I think most cops are like that because we're very humble, but there is some strange connection. You mentioned that you're out of law enforcement, but you still feel like a cop. It makes me sad because I'll see an old timer in the hallway and they introduce themselves. Oh, I used to work here. And you shake their hand and you say, hey, what's up? And they worked here for like 32 years. And then you find out that they were this, badass and all this other stuff. But it doesn't even really register because life goes on. Nobody cares. And that sounds mean, but it's true. It's just that no one really gives a shit after you leave. And it makes me really sad because I'll see these retirements and I know these guys personally, and you'll see, thank you for your 25 years of service. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. That is literally what the email says. But it's like, wow, I remember when you pulled that burning infant out of a car and tried to do CPR on it. That's not in the email. Just all these things that all of these great men and women have seen. And at the end of the day, it just sort of goes away. That's a weird thing to try and comprehend. And then exiting this job, keeping all that in mind, it's almost like a working dog that has to suddenly stop working. We're just animals. And you just see him kind of wander the house like, so what do I do now? And it's like, well, this is your new life. Okay. Yeah. So
how dare you, Mac? You're talking about me. How dare you?
With his spin, right? Like, no, I was my canine, when I retired him, he was fine. I was like, well, maybe he didn't need to be a police dog, but some dogs, like, they lose their minds, right? They're like they're digging a hole like 20 feet down. They're chewing up the garden hose into these little bits, right? They're giving themselves health issues because they don't have that purpose. And so I think that a couple things from the conversation, right? Like I want to go back to that car analogy, right? Because it's frequently used in wellness, and I think that when we talk about the agency not caring, I think that's where we build in the culture, like these practices and these expectations. And we can definitely talk about standards for officers, but standards for agencies, which is to promote wellness and build the right mechanisms so you are maintaining that car, right? I'm not a car guy, but a dude that I work with is, and literally talking about cars, not cops. He was like, well, I wouldn't be so concerned about mileage if you over maintain it. Like, rather than wait until 3, 4, 5,000 miles to change the oil, change it way before that. He's like, I would buy a highly over maintained car any day with higher mileage. And so when you said that metaphor, it made me think of that, right? So when we have mental health checks, when we have working out on duty, when we have a culture of like actual peer support, not just policy, not just writing, but when people actually feel comfortable with their trusted peers to be like, hey, can I hit you up about something? Or they have these resources where someone in just a well-respected officer is in roll call or briefing and says, yeah, I checked into rehab. It was really helpful. I wish I had a therapist early on. It might have saved me a marriage. That's huge, right? Like they feel so safe to say that, and then it creates this safety amongst others to receive that, whether they even go there or not. But they're like, okay, cool. Like that was super legit of Smith to say that. Now I have a role model where it's not weak to accept help, and in fact, he's exactly the kind of cop I want to be. So you're just you're propelling the right kind of mechanisms, I think, to maintain this career for as long as you choose to do it. And that's kind of the phrase I like saying now, rather than like a full career. Like a full career is relative. Like 5 years might be a full career for the same things that we're talking about, right? Because ultimately I have to believe that everyone here, like however many years we have, maybe I have 2 left, I don't know, but I have to believe that I can look back and feel really good about the work I did because of my values, but also the bonds I built. I do want to inject one more thing, because we're talking about people kind of exiting out and they're given a certificate or an email, and then their key card's taken away. And this is something I thought about ever since I was listening to an older episode with Scott Medlin. He's a speaker, and he's posting this content all the time about kind of maintaining your resilience. He's like, but we say we're family, but then at the end of the day, even after 30 years, 35 years, right? You're talking about this hero cop of yesteryear, with these real amazing experiences. But then it's like, well, hey fam, give me that key card. Like, you don't get to just come into the, to the break room and shoot the shit with the young guys. Like, no, you get 1 or 2 days a year where you can come get qualled, and we'll give you a little breakfast, and you can go take your maple bar, go on your way. But it's true. And so I want to compare that to a story where I heard as an earlier cop, like this guy saying that no one cared when he left. No one cared when he left. And I was like, well, I know a lot of people that have left, and I talk to them all the time. And so it made me think about, maybe it's a harkening back to the theme of humility, but like, and earning it, right? Like, we talked about the idea of earning this, credibility or this relationship. But I'm like, what did you do? Like, was it just by virtue of wearing a badge that you just thought you had friends for life, or did you actually invest into relationships? Because I feel confident, like having many friends that I used to work with that don't do policing anymore. I feel very confident that I'm going to have those bonds for life, and bonds with others that are cops when I so choose to leave, or when I have to leave, because I build relationships. So it's like, we don't get anything just by virtue. And I think that kind of goes with the hero label or whatever. But we got to earn it daily. We got to earn our, I suppose, relationships, our respect, our self-respect. And I mean, that may play into everything that we're talking about so far.
Yeah, I think like like when we talk about identifying as a police officer, right? I mean, there's kind of 2 prongs to it, and the one you just brought up, which is kind of being part of the fraternity, right? Like, can I maintain these relationships I had on the job after, right? I think the other thing is just, again, we're all going to identify as a police officer in some way, right? I think there's a follow-up question to that, though, which is like, then what? So, I identified it as a police officer, and then it's over. And what do I do? And I think I try to, when I, try to develop my thoughts on that, it's what can we do to mitigate that feeling of emptiness, right? At that point. And I think, again, a big part of it goes to exactly what you just said, which is what resume did you build while you were on the job? Because then it goes back to, even if there's not other people around, even if other people don't respect what you did or know what you did, because again, like, you can be the best cop in the world, and there's going to be people that you never hear from again, and you never reach out to, right? That's another thing we can talk about. But and just in my own personal experience, I'll catch myself sometimes thinking, man, like, I miss this. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel like I did everything I wanted to. But what I did do was, during my time, is I did a lot of work that I'm proud of, and I can go back and I can find that validation in that work. And the problem there, obviously, is there's a lot of officers that can't do that, and they don't even realize that until perhaps there's a time in their career where it's over and they can't go back and fix that, and they're not recognizing that that's going to be an issue in 10, 15, 20 years. And so that's one of the things I really want to preach to young cops, which is, you're going to get out of this job what you put in a lot of ways. You're going to get a lot of things out that you don't necessarily want either, right? But if you treat it from the beginning as something that is more of a privilege than a right, and you can take advantage of every day, right? What do I want to get out of this job? Again, you're going to sacrifice something, but I also want to get something out of this, whether that's doing good police work, right? Actually going out there and helping people, helping victims of crime, whatever it is. One day, all you're going to be left with is, maybe a retired ID card and whatever resume you put together during that time. And if it's something you can be proud of, it's going to fill that emptiness a little bit, right? But we also, as a community, I think we got to do better with lifting people up when they're ready to go, and also recognize, like, look, there's, like Max said, and Eric too, like, there's people in this job that aren't fit for it. It's not for them. They shouldn't be here. Some of them linger longer than they should. Some get out because, again, like, you get into it and you just realize, this isn't for me. I think that's probably the better scenario than the opposite, which is people that just stick in it and kind of take a space, right? But again, it's about building that resume. And again, Trevor, you might be able to attest to this too. Like, the harsh reality is when you get out of law enforcement, wherever you go, man, there's a lot of people that don't give a shit what you did, right? They don't care. They don't care you were a cop. Just like if you go in wherever it is, like, and that's just not law enforcement. That's not just the military. That's life, man. Like, you go and people are worried about their own lives. They're thinking the same things. They're trying to internalize the same validation that we are, right? They're not necessarily impressed with your resume or the work you did or your experience. So you got to make sure that you're going to be proud of the work you put in, because you might be the only one that's going to be sitting there looking at it and asking that question. And if you're also there answering it with, shit, I should have done more, that's what you're going to be stuck with.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece. Earlier a part was, can you have someone that doesn't identify so strongly, like personally, with that passion? And no, the vast majority, I think that we're a little unique is a nice way to put it. Someone might even say, like, crazy or odd, right, to sign up for this type of job because of the mortality, because of the implications. Like, you have to give a damn. You have to be so passionate about it, and you have to believe in something. And so it does make it hard to have that quote unquote healthy balance, if it even is a thing, with that. Now, do you see people that are uninvested? Absolutely, whether they started that way or they got that way. And that's another way to look at, like, that lack of standards, right? Like, lack of expectations, where we're allowing people to just simply exist here. I mean, we've all worked with, and maybe still work with, that kind of cop that is never the first one there, and never that first one to make that pivotal point, I suppose, action or enforcement. They're kind of last there. They're always there. So they're never in the moment. They're never in that kind of critical thing, which is really sad, because when we talk about attitude or cynicism or jadedness, like, I think at least like if you're jaded, you're being affected by some things, right? And like, and so your mentality goes a certain way, or cynicism, negativity, pessimism, like you still have emotion there. You care so much about something. So you're actually, I would take the pessimism or the angry, fist pounding person in briefing, because they clearly care. They care a lot. It's how do you kind of mobilize that in a more constructive direction versus the apathetic person, like just the slug that's just there to kind of take some calls, just do enough work to get the charge off your back. I mean, that's what's really sad. And we talk about, someone talked about helping victims, right? Like, I think that's a flip that I tried to introduce as much as I could for anyone that would hear it after the initial, I suppose there was no initial attrition. People just kept leaving for a few years, but hey, like we're not those of us that choose to stay, like those that left, like no hard feelings, totally get it. But if we're gonna be here, let's be here, and let's stop bitching. Let's just be more constructive. Let's focus on what we can do, not what we can't, because we could spend all day and night talking about what we can't do and just being, kind of having this pity party. And so, like, how do we flip it so that we're focused on the actual victims, not adopting that ourselves?
Yeah. I just want to point out, you guys who are listening, you can't see JT, but whoever has Charles Remsburg novels behind them in the podcast, you should probably listen to them. Side note,
you're leaning in and squinting.
Thank you.
Good books, Charles Remsburg. You can find them on Amazon. There's several that I own they're like Bibles. Buy them. Yeah, I really wonder. I mean, there was a really cool analogy that I heard years ago. A guy named Ed Calderon, Manifesto podcast, really interesting guy. I got to be on his show a couple of months ago. Just an amazing experience. But I think it was when he was on Rogan, he talked about this bus. It was a metaphor. And everyone on this bus is basically your colleagues. And you're just sort of driving around. And everyone on the bus is exhausted, just tired. And eventually you're going to get off. And when you get off the bus, you better be damn sure that you're ready because you can't get back on. So the way that I kind of interpreted that was, for this was my 14th year. And I would say the last 5 or so probably really gave me a lot of rewarding experiences, especially working sex assault, child abuse, and trafficking. Really, really intense cases that were extremely difficult to work, but the reward was there. And I always tell people, you want to feel, most of the time, if you're a good cop, if you're good at what you do, if you're in this job for the right reasons, you're going to feel a little bit crazy 80% of the time. And that's okay. You should feel a little bit unstable mentally because you're invested in this career. If you're going to work and nothing's bothering you, either you had a really good week or something's wrong with you. And the newer guys and gals, a lot of people that are working now, it's almost like this social media identity where they want to just be a cop to have the pictures and all that stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love pictures. I take them all the time, but it's usually when we're doing something really, really cool, where afterward I have that really special photo that only I get to see, and maybe a few others where we did this really cool thing, or a scenario where the photos are so horrible that only I will know what it means to me. And those are the really cool bonds that we make. But I just sort of feel like that's lacking. And you guys don't know me personally outside of this, but I'm not 24/7 cop. The mindset's there. I'm really into all the things to keep me and my family safe and be ready, but I try to disconnect and stay away from that really, really hard, just so that it doesn't become an identity crisis. And that, I mean, I'm kind of unique in that regard because some people not necessarily eat, sleep, and breathe the job, but they eat, sleep, and breathe cop. And those are the guys who usually kind of end up, the ones who are like really into it, they'll make the news someday because they're just kind of in this job for the wrong reasons. And there's a small group of those individuals, but sadly they get highlighted when they make a mistake. And I'm not saying that just because you're passionate about this job doesn't mean that you can't be proud of it, but there's a fine line between, the guys who will go out of their way to appear to be cops versus doing the job. And for me, and what I really encourage the young people to do is at the end of every week, hopefully you're exhausted. Hopefully you're mentally done, not to the point of insanity, but you should feel stressed. If you're not feeling stressed, then, you're not doing enough. And exposure in that regard, like I really harp on, the humility aspect and being able to say, I've never done that before, or being able to say, be honest about what you've done, because we've all been in those briefings or ops plans or whatever, where there's a couple of guys in the room who aren't going to say that they haven't done something, or they're not going to ask a question because they're afraid. No, expose yourself to all that stuff. Get your hands dirty and you'll feel better. And when the time comes, because I think all of us, we all have our limitations in terms of things that we want to do, but you might blink and 20 years goes by and deep down you really go, did I do enough? Did I do anything? And I'm good. I know that I could retire today and I have so much horrible shit inside my head that I'm good. I've done this, I've done that. I could leave today and be totally fine. I would hate to be 10, 15, 20 years in and then go, ooh, time to get to work. That's not why we do this. That's not why we took this job. And I always say this to people, it's never too late to change, because a lot of guys get caught up. Well, I may as well just, no, fuck that. Go. If you want to do something cool, go do it. You can, if you want to be SWAT and you never did and you're 42 years old, well, hit the gym. Go try out. You're not going to know until you try. Or maybe I'm too old to do this or too old to do that. No, it's what you make of it. And time-wise, physically, eventually you're going to get off the bus because of your head or because of your body or because of retirement. And those are kind of the three things that will keep you on the bus. And I hope that for most people it's retirement. I would hate for it to be anything else, but be ready for that exit. And sometimes when you're forced to exit, it's a really shitty feeling to think, man, I'm now being forced to leave and I didn't even get to do half of what I want.
So that's a theme I want to keep going on. And you're talking about getting off the bus. And for two of us that have gotten off the bus, I'm curious if there are personal reflections that you have that you would share that were helpful in that process, or in hindsight, things that you wish you would have done or you'd encourage people to do, whether they're 2 years on or whether they're 15 years on, to help that bridge.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. I think the biggest thing is just to allow yourself to explore that avenue. I remember thinking like, there's nothing else I could ever do where I'd get paid this much, or I don't have any other skills, or nothing I do here applies to anything else. And you have that talk, and enough of you have it, where I would have it with almost everyone, that you start to feel trapped in this profession. And I loved the job. It's all I ever wanted to do since I was a kid. It was my dream job. I loved it every day until I didn't. And when I didn't, it was a major thing in my life that took a long time for me to build up the courage to explore other avenues. And so what I would think is that people need to understand that it's okay to not enjoy the job for a little while. But if that little while and every day you look in the mirror and you've said enough of the days, I'm not happy doing this, you got to do something about it. And it's scary as hell, especially if it's all you've ever known. But once you step out of it and realize the opportunity, it's oddly liberating. So I think in that sense, I wish I would have had a little bit more courage on myself, or knew someone that had stepped out, that could speak to me about that. Because now that I'm outside, in many ways, I feel like the world's my oyster, and I'm not limited to some belief. Like, I mean, heck, I went and I was a firefighter, and it was very difficult, and I loved it, but it wasn't for me. And the guys that were there, they were great guys, but it was their passion, it was their dream job. And then I was like, well, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go do this next thing. And you kind of get this confidence that, like, man, I could probably almost do anything. And so, but unfortunately, you never get to see that till you've already taken that big step. And if I think, like, in hindsight, something I didn't anticipate, or I might have, I think just the constant struggle of a little itch in the back of your head for the job, or like I mean, we've beaten identity to a pulp. But I kind of think of it as like NFL players, their whole lives they wanted to play in the NFL, and then they get hurt by an injury or they retire. Like Tom Brady, he couldn't win more Super Bowls. He couldn't have done better. He would have played till he was 100, and he retires and he probably still misses it. I think there's always a little bit of that in law enforcement that I didn't expect. When I left, I was like, boom, I'm done. I'm not going to miss any of this. I'll never have to write another report. I'll never collect a stupid piece of evidence. This is awesome. And years later, I'm like, I kind of miss a little bit of that. So I don't know how to combat that. I think JT hit a ton of good like made a ton of good points in the sense of have something that you can lean back on and have some pride in, and all those plaques that I got that I thought were cheesy. Sometimes every once in a while, every few months, I get one out and look at it and remember a cool call, like the calls we've been on, Eric, and you're like, man, I did some cool stuff, and that was enough. And so I don't know, it's kind of turning into like an exit podcast. I'm so grateful there's still guys and gals that do it, but I think that we do need to explore these things more, and the repercussions of them, and that you can do it. You can have a great career and leave and still have your head held high.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said, Trevor. I'll kind of give an inverse example of that, which was I was kind of the opposite. Like it took me a while to kind of get used to not being there, right? Like to the point where like even nowadays I forget about the stuff I hated, right? You got to kind of remind yourself about that. But also I think in addition to what you're saying about, if you're finding yourself just like miserable every day, right? I think also if you're finding yourself just so in love with the job that you're like actively sacrificing other things in your life, whether it's your family, your kids, whatever it is, time with them, that's also when you got to sit back and just stop yourself. That's what happened to me. At the end of my career, I was professionally, what I was doing in the job, it was the most fun I've ever had. I was loving it. The work meant it was important work. It was fun. It was exhilarating. Like you get addicted to it, right? And there was absolutely a point where there was sacrifices made to time with my family, time with my kids. And that doesn't, again, I think either way, that doesn't mean your career's over. You need to like find an exit plan right away. I think it's just, those are the points where you got to sit back and you just got to be honest with yourself. Right. I think we all love to talk about how much, family's the most important thing, right? Well, sometimes we don't make that decision, right? Sometimes we don't practice that. And this job makes it really hard to do that sometimes because it is that much fun sometimes. Like even if it's 10% of the job, like that 10% is fun, right? The 90% sucks. And the 90% makes you want to go home and drink and cry sometimes, right? But that 10%, man, that's good 10%. That's how important our mentors and our supervisors our sergeants are. That they need to be the ones that are seeing these young guys. And I was one of those young guys that my sergeant had to pull me aside and say, "Hey, man, like what's going on? Like, slow down, right?" It's so important to kind of see that because again, I think a lot of times we're not going to see that in ourselves. But getting out again, there's going to be a part of you that you leave behind. There's going to be, I think every cop that had at least part of their time that they enjoyed is going to look back and say, I missed this stuff. I missed that. I remember the first time where I started getting the group thread, the text messages, right, about, I won't go into all the details, but there's an officer that had been shot. And instinctually, I'm like, oh, I got to go. Like this would be the time when I'm getting my stuff and I'm headed out there. And the realization of like, nope, like they're not calling you anymore. Like it's not your time. We don't need you. Like, everyone else is going, but you stay where you are. That's tough, man. It's a tough reality, but it does get better over time. And I think a lot of it does go to, all right, where am I going to focus next? Right. Who am I going to become after this? That part of me, you transition from police officer to former police officer, but you can't stay in just former police officer. 3 years down the road, you can't say, well, what do you do? Well, I used to be a cop. Yeah. But like, what do you now? Right. Like, what are you going to transition to? Because the longer you tell yourself that story, I used to do this, I used to do that, you define yourself. Now you're defining yourself on what you used to do. The sooner you can step into something new and whatever it is your path is, and it might not be as fun as being a cop, right? You're still going to have times where it's going to be tough. But if you're only doing yourself a disservice by not at least attempting to step into your new role, whatever that is, right? It could be anything. Sometimes it just means father or mother or friend, retire, whatever it is. It's tough, but everyone's got to do it. And again, like kind of what we talked about at the beginning, it could happen in 2 years. You could do this job for 40 years and you're still going to have to go through the same transition. It might not be as difficult, but in a lot of ways it is. I mean, I've seen those cops that did it for way, way longer and they kept doing it because they didn't know what was going to happen on the other side. And I'm sure all of us, probably know a cop or two that, they spent a long time in this career. They retired and they were dead very shortly after, within a few years, whether it's heart attacks, whatever it is, like that's real. And obviously we can't go and ask them if they felt it was worth it. But that's something we just got to have honest conversations about, I think, and just, make sure that, hey, whatever we're doing, we're at least trying to prepare ourselves and each other for the end at some point, because the end's going to come one way or another. Enjoy everything you can, today, and just make the most of it.
Yeah. You hit on a lot of things, and I'll probably zigzag around, but one that you ended with, I think that reminds us, and Mac, writes a lot about this, but that sense of stoicism that I think is helpful for a lot of us, for whatever reason. I'm sure it's the mortality thing, right? So not to be dark, but just to realize that all of our time is limited, and so we make the most of it, and we control our controllables. And so with that, I think, whether it's the sports metaphor, like when you leave it all on the field, but you also know that there has to be a next chapter, and not only does it have to reluctantly, but like that's good. Rather than making it all about the gold medal or the Super Bowl championship, and then you're like, well, what am I training for now? Like, even if you're healthy, like there's a lot of reports and incidents of high depression and loss of purpose after someone gold medals, because they're like, well, now what? Like the next Olympics is in 4 years, and I may or may not be too old, and what if I get hurt between then? Like, so just a recognition that there always has to be a next, and maybe a flip is, rather than focus all of our effort. I mean, for gold medalists, you kind of have to focus all your effort there, right? But also recognize that, hey, like the new dopamine spike might be, I got to figure out the rest of me. Like I got to figure out what my other passions are, on the back burner. I do think that there's value, extreme value, in encouraging people to have those other, I mean, whether it's Gil Martin talking about your hobbies, like maintain your hobbies, but it is just sense of purpose, right? Max already talked about, he's got a plan. He's back in school. He's hitting the books. He has something that is very meaningful to him that he knows, and we all know from his experiences how fantastic of a first responder, a cop, mental health practitioner he'll be, because he's like beyond culturally competent. Like that's going to be extremely invaluable. JT, you're out of the business, and yet you are coaching and mentoring all these people at scale, helping all these cops, people young and old, right, be more safe, be more accountable, developing leaders, right? They're reading these little nuggets of like, oh yeah, I should get in the gym, or yeah, like the community safety does depend on whether I decide to slack or whether I take ownership of my job and my potential role here, right? Trevor, like we're always talking, you're a dad, you're a family man. At the same time, like your job, you're still keeping people safe, right? It's just a different environment. And so all healthy examples. So when I think Trevor was joking about like this being more exit-y, in 2020, I tried to circle the wagons with my patrol squad, and I sat down with each one saying, hey, if you didn't do this job anymore, what would it be? And I felt really at odds with doing that. I felt like I was maybe helping people leave, but I had to believe that my job, and I still believe it, is helping people be their best. And when we help people be their best, they're gonna be better cops if they stay. And if they don't, they'll be great somewhere else, and we'll have the benefit of all their service. Like we might not have them with a key card in hand still, but like they help build the legacy. I firmly believe so many people that I looked up to through the years that came before me set me on a path, and the people I work with on a path to do better than, apathetic, people that came before us. Like where would our department be if we had just a bunch of people that just didn't care? They clocked in, clocked out, right? And so I think just that's a long-winded way of saying it all pays into the whole. When we look at like a pie chart, I think when we adopt these other identities, like we can overlay them. It doesn't have to, increasing your woodworking slice of, pizza doesn't have to diminish you being a cop. If anything, it would probably make it better, right? I'm writing, Mac's writing. I have to believe that makes me a better cop. But if I'm not a cop, like I could write, like I'm a very viable writer. Like that's fantastic for me, and it develops a sense of agency and empowerment that ultimately, because I still want to be a cop, it helps me be a cop, or promoting. I'm arguably not a cop, so Thanks for not making that joke earlier. Like you're like, actually, three of us aren't cops
We
anymore.
were being nice. Yeah.
But I still got a key card. But in any case, I have to believe that, in part of that is maybe you could even make the argument that I transitioned out in a way, right? Because I'm not doing what my guys and gals are doing on the street. Certainly not. It's a way different job. I still get to, to carry the hat or the card, but at times, I mean, let's be real. Like, there's a lot of people that recognize I don't carry the same card as they do. So, yeah, just me trying to process some of the nuggets that you guys all put out and bring it back together into tangible things. So it doesn't have to be exiting, but ultimately, I think that the benefit can be multi-pronged, right? Whether developing yourself to stay or to go, like, cool, it's still developing yourself. That's a win for everyone around you.
Yeah, if you develop yourself as a human being and a professional, you're going to benefit yourself, your family, the people you work with, no matter where you go. I think also, like, kudos to you too for even bringing up those conversations with your guys, because I think we all know, like, that doesn't happen all the time, right? And I mean, I rag on leadership as much as anyone, but in terms of like frontline supervisors, frontline leadership, man, I had some great frontline supervisors, right? And they were the ones that were still kind of in the thick of it with you. And again, that's why I talk about they're so important, man, because they were there. Yeah, they're a step above you. They're, they have more responsibility and kind of a different role, but they're still there. And I had some great ones, and they were a lot of the ones that I learned from as, going through my 20s and 30s, and they might be in their late 30s and 40s. And those are the guys, like, I think that mentorship, especially like, and, as men, right? As young men, as men getting older, having those other male mentors is something that I think is somewhat of a dying art, just in society, it seems. And I just think that speaks to how important it is. Having people that, and again, in a job as difficult as this is, people that have already gone through it, done things that you want to do, have seen the struggles, the divorces, the drinking problems, the guys that, went astray. Man, having those a front line there for the guys that are coming up to really mold them into what they need to become, not just as police officers, but as people, is huge. And I think maybe we don't even give them enough credit. I know I certainly don't, and I don't think we put enough focus on that job either. I think once you get above that, again, you start getting in the real command staff. It becomes a different thing, right? It's a different game. But kudos to you for doing that. I appreciate that, because I know I've had conversations with supervisors. I've had those conversations with me that were meaningful, and I still remember them, and they're important. So,
yeah, man. Well, we covered a lot of ground. We talked about, I think we hit everything I really wanted to and more. We talked about, the real talk. There's plenty of real talk through and throughout. I'll check contains explicit content on this episode. Just
Mac.
A little bit of just real language. No.
I have a potty mouth.
Bad Mac. But no, hopefully everyone got this sense of, what can feel like angst can also quickly, with the right mindset, turn into agency. Like, what you need to do, what track you're on, what you want to, move toward. And that's where I'm like really trying to not just like turn people down or turn them off because you're pessimistic. No, you still care, but then you can mobilize that into something positive, right? Whether it starts with yourself for sure, and then it's the people you work around, and that that bleeds into the culture. I thought we would talk a lot about culture, and we did in a lot of different ways, right? There's that dichotomy of like this inner circle and this very special thing that you may or may not have in the same way, but certainly not like you're just kicked to the curb. Like, invest in your relationships, invest in yourself. And so we should be able to get out of it what we put into it, right? I think it was JT that said that earlier on, where you absolutely do, and you can. But I really appreciate all your guys' time. I kind of want to go around the horn and see what closing thoughts you had, either summaries or just, kind of riffing on all the things we were talking about. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. Yeah, it was an exit, I guess, conversation, but I think if the younger guys understood that that's such a vital part of your entry is to understand that this might go away someday. So, we always joke, it's not always, MP5s and burritos. It can be pretty messed up stuff. So yeah, have a plan. My rule is that you give yourself 5 years. If it's anything less than that, you're going to regret it. So if you think that you hate your job, fine. If you really, really hate your job, sure. But if one day you actually say, I can't do this anymore, and you don't have a plan, you're going to be screwed. So plan the exit, even if you're not planning on doing the exit anytime soon. Give yourself an out and take care of your mental health more than anything. You'll thank yourself, because mental health is physical health and vice versa. So that's really all I got. It's been a lot of fun talking to you guys. And for those of you who are listening, who are starting this career, best of luck. For those of you who are in the middle, best of luck. And for those of you at the end, congratulations.
Yeah, I'll just say, there's no shame in leaving the job, but also give yourself the chance, like Max said. I'm out here on the East Coast. You guys are on the West Coast. There's a lot of different police agencies out there. And just because the one that you landed at is not working out, that doesn't mean it's the end of your career. It could just not be a good fit, right? Look for those agencies that show that they support the work that you want to do, whatever that is. And focus your efforts on there. I mean, it's probably easier than ever to kind of investigate and research different agencies specifically. Do that work ahead of time, because it will save you time. And if you land in an agency that just isn't what you think it is, don't throw away the job completely. Give yourself that opportunity to go out, find a different department, find a different agency. It's not. I get this question a lot, which is like, does it look bad upon you? I mean, I know cops that have gone to multiple agencies. It's almost not even a discussion point in a lot of ways, right? Eric, you can probably talk to that more than anyone, but don't be afraid to ever go out there and look for different opportunities. Create those opportunities for yourself through professional development, just doing a good job, networking, building yourself up. And good luck to everyone. Stay safe.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what JT said, I think he made a really good point on. I never lateraled, and who knows if that would have been the right option. But I was just, as he was talking, thinking about the analogy of like, this career is something that you're possibly committing to for like 30 years. That's like a marriage. If you go on a date with a girl and you're like, she's cute, but then a few months in, you're like, I don't really like her at all. You just break up and you go find another girlfriend. Like, this job isn't the same way in a sense, but it should be. If you end up in something, you don't need to stay in a toxic relationship. There could be another location or another agency that would be a perfect fit for you, and you ride out your 30 years. I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom about this job. Obviously, I left, but I love this job, and I love the people that do it, and it can be the best job on planet Earth. You will do and see things that no other human being will, and they'll be traumatic, but they'll also be incredible. And so it's hard from this end. I don't want people to think that I'm all negative, but it's the best job ever. And if it's not right for you, I think JT makes a really good point. Maybe try somewhere else if you still have that fire, and maybe there's just something going on organizationally. So feel free to date around is my final piece.
Yeah, I love that you guys brought that up, because it's, it was something that I really wanted to inject if it didn't come up after Max spoke, right? But it's, if we could be cynical, be like, oh yeah, this is helping people plan their exit. It's like, well, no, we should plan our exit. And I actually wrote a piece on that. It didn't get picked up by any police publications. Like, you can't imagine why, right? It was called like
not right now.
No, I can't wait to see what you title this thing, Blue Grit Radio, when you want to quit.
Yeah, well, it's like the article, the blog article ended up being was like your backup career, right? Like we have backup guns, backup flashlights, we have contingency planning. That's what makes us good at our job, and yet we kind of don't want to talk about this this uncomfortable, what if or actually eventuality, right? So hopefully, I mean, we have to meet the audience where they are, and they're all over the place. Some people are wanting to be cops, and hopefully you heard enough of this. Like, no, we all are very appreciative, grateful for our experiences, no matter the length, and we're all highly still involved, and it's a piece of our life and interactions. Hence why we're all talking about it for just over an hour. But at the same time, I love the aspect of, I said this in recruiting a lot, right? And that was, hey, I respect your choice going over there. Now, if something doesn't pan out the way that if it's not everything they said they would be and more in 1 to 2 years, like, let us know, right? Like, and so to answer what JT said, it really depends. And I know that some regions of the country, it is really common to keep jumping because you just have corrosive leadership. And then you get in with an agency, you're like, okay, finally I found the right stuff. And so I think it is worth like these lower hanging fruits to evaluate objectively. Is it really like not the career for you anymore, right? Can you get in a different assignment? I mean, it might even be a different shift. Like you love working nights, you love it, hate day shift, but maybe it's just the people. Maybe you go to day shift, you're like, oh my gosh, like the people, not everyone's trying to fight me or, flee from me or lie to me. And I had that, right? And so I can reflect on that as an earlier cop where there are pieces of me that really do appreciate when certain administrations make you actually rotate shifts after so many rotations, just so you do it. See if you can work a specialty. See if you can get on with, a little ancillary duty like drones, UAS, right? Like where it might light this spark in you to reinvest and learn something else. Or ultimately leave, right? Like you can lateral to a different agency. You can try a different, you can go to fire and see if that's for you or not. I barely scratched the surface talking about this, but I almost left my agency within the last couple of years. And ultimately, it was an opportunity that really excited me. And although the opportunity, I didn't move forward with it, like that recognition that I didn't have to be the walls of my department, I didn't have to be in my patch, was extremely liberating. And it helped me realize that, no, amongst the stuff I'm not happy about, there are so many people and things that I am happy about. So I'm going to stay. Like, and that was before I promoted. But that was such a flip for me. It lit this spark of like why I'm staying. So ultimately, I do think that when people, even the private, like if they're looking at the private sector, like, yeah, polish up your resume, because even doing that and applying, you might be like, you know what, actually, I don't want to do this job. I've been visualizing what that day looks like. I don't want to do it yet. And I want to stay here. And so that's where I think the backup career notion, or just that continual thirst for self-development, which is absolutely something you're doing if you're following JT or Mac or here, it's part of the thing that we can do to make sure that we're doing our best. And then our choices, our career, all those things are reflecting what we want to do. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. And just one last thing for not Trevor, because you'll never find him. No, but JT and Mac, please share where you're at, where people can find your content and get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm at Survive Policing and at Police Post.
At the Zen Cop, most of the listening platforms, and then Malice Company is also me. That's a holster thing I do on the side. People always ask, so it's kind of a as I have time type thing. But yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Oh, thanks, gents. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.